Okay, let's call our meeting of October 2nd for the Finance and Audit Committee at 6:06. And if I could have roll call, please.
Here. Here.
He's absent.
Here.
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 Here. Thank you. And Joanne is also absent today. Okay, and if we could do a pledge of allegiance. Okay, I did want to make an announcement. Mr. Hollowell has resigned from the committee. He's going to be moving out of state. So he has resigned all of his committee positions at the city. So we will be moving our first alternate position up as a regular member. I'm looking. I can't remember which one was first alternate.
First one's Stephen, right?
Steve Martina? Is it your first?
Second.
Your
The
second?
second? Oh,
Okay.
we must have it in a different
So
order.
it's John Chamberlain is in first position. Okay, so he would move
Okay.
into as a regular committee member. Joanne's flight was delayed by a day, so she's absent this evening. Is there any adjustments to the agenda? And any conflict of interest disclosures?
I think Steve was the first alternate on the second.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I'd become the first alternate after that.
yes.
He was here, hasn't he been? He's been the last couple of
He has been, yeah, right?
He was here last
Yeah,
week.
he has been the last couple.
On the agenda, we list Jennifer Burnett as a member, and I think she resigned several months ago, so
Yeah,
Jennifer Burnett.
Yeah, Jennifer and Diana Harris somehow slipped back onto the members, so.
depends on which,
Yeah, I'll have Nicole correct that on the next one,
depends on which template you use,
I
right?
guess. Okay, we'll move on. Oh, is there any public comment this evening? Looks like we do not have any public comment. So we'll move on to our action items. Item number 1, which is the adoption of the minutes. Do we have any corrections to the minutes? I have none this week. Good. I could have a motion to accept the minutes if there's no corrections.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I'm abstaining, I was not present.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 2, which is the SCO report checklist update.
I could just stand here the rest of the meeting.
Yes,
Yeah.
you could.
The SEO checklist, it's really, nothing's really changed. We just have the last 2 items to work on, which are in process. One being the fixed asset and GASB 34 valuation. I should be getting that report this month. And then working on our policies and procedures, which we're continuing to do. So otherwise, it's really the same document with just a few extra comments here and there, but no significant changes.
And your timeline is the same, Milana?
Has not changed.
Okay.
Did we actually get a document? Did you submit a document?
Yes, it was,
Receive and file that, or anything, do any action?
It's just we're in the process of just going through and updating those items that we needed to.
Right.
We were kind of holding on the updates, waiting for the new software system to, get up and functional so that Milana had a chance to go through and update those.
So this is not an official report to this committee, it's just an update.
Exactly.
right. Once we get everything all settled, then we'll put all the final comments in it, and then we'll call it a final report, and we can then forward it to council as well.
Wonderful.
I know that your timeline is the end of year. And are you thinking that you're going to be able to report to us in the month of December? Or are you going to have to wait till January? I just want our expectations to be realistic,
Reasonable.
but also to be able to put on the agenda when we will actually be
Right,
looking at the
because-
finalization.
If we meet only once a month, then I've got a meeting in November and then December. So let's say I'll finish writing them in December to be
January.
finished in January by the
Okay.
committee.
Okay.
So we can put a hard date of January for it to be reviewed, we believe. And at that time, we may finally be 100% clear on finishing it.
On the checklist,
Okay,
yep.
good. Excellent.
Is there any other questions on the SCO checklist? Okay, if not, we'll move on to item number 3, which is Finance Department Policies and Procedures Overview, Draft 2.
Draft 2. I took the comments from the committee on the policies that I had put together for the overview and updated them for those comments. So I didn't know if you had the opportunity to read through it, but I tried to put a better definition of what to expect as far as the basis of reporting on a monthly basis versus year end. And I cleaned up the rotation of duties, the vacations, that language, I cleaned that up. And I changed the section that was protection of assets. I've changed it to protection of assets and confidential information, so that it has a little more clarity. And then I tried to make the language be more specific so that it wasn't mixed up. So really, it just took the comments from the committee and updated the language.
How many drafts are we gonna have?
Well, I'm doing one section at a time. So this one, it's in its second draft for the committee. If the language looks good, then I'll set that aside. We're going to do the second section also tonight, and maybe I bring it back next time with some revisions as well when I bring the next section so that we can try and keep it moving. Then when we're all done, then I'll have them all together. I'll have them numbered. I'll have a by chapter and have it as an actual document.
So
full
how many
document.
sections in total are you
I
thinking you're
was
going to have to revise?
thinking that we have the overview, we'll have cash receipts, cash disbursements, and fixed assets. Then we can talk about if we wanted to do any that are more specific, like to break down and say, but we want to do something where we talk about how we're accounting for the CFDs, even though it really does fall under cash disbursements and cash receipts. What is that? Do we want to do payroll as a separate function where we do something for overview of that, kind of see what else we want to do. But my main ones were the overview, which sets the whole standard, doing the capital assets because the city hasn't really had a capital asset policy before, and then having the cash receipts and cash disbursements. That's the major activity in the finance department.
Now, the finance policies and procedures, I'm sorry, am I the only one?
Go ahead.
The finance policies and procedures is a component of the SEO checklist.
Yes, because
So-
they said there was nothing in writing. They said there was nothing in writing, and so we do have a financial policy that is citywide that council adopted. So technically, we've met that particular item they had.
Okay.
But we're now going to the next level, which is, okay, now what does finance have specifically that they have oversight for reporting citywide, and how are we going to go about that?
Okay, because I was kind of wondering about your delivery of the SEO checklist in January, and if you're looking to make sure that these are finished and updated by then that backs you up into November, December to make sure you get finished or sign off or whatever on these, and so.
Right, to
Okay.
use the big pieces and make that our first policy, then that's great. And then we can start talking about, okay, what more do we want? Or then getting into the procedures, we'll be doing like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Screenshots of the software, that kind of thing, which I didn't think the committee would need to see, the procedural part, but I want to be sure we have all the right policies in place.
Okay.
From my viewpoint, I think it's important for this committee to have those reports that we talked about. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I don't know if you expounded upon any of those. But I remember the previous meeting, we brought up some categories, some kind of overview type things. And I think what I saw, to be honest with you, I didn't read it in depth and in detail, but in looking it over, what I saw is you captured that well in terms of what I think this committee needs.
Okay.
In terms of those reports.
Okay.
So from our standpoint of being vigilant and oversight and et cetera, I think we'll be getting the information based on what you're working on that we'll need to look from an overview standpoint to make sure everything's moving in that direction.
Right, and what she's working on right now is putting the actual policy and procedure manual together. So that's this component of putting that overview, and then we're going to go into the, I guess, what you'd call what, the first chapter?
Well, let's just say it was the next one that I wanted to put together because of circumstances. It may not be the next chapter. We may put it in a different order, but
Yeah. Okay.
the next item is for the capital asset policy because I'm working on that specifically. So I wanted to try and pull it all together while it was on my mind.
Wonderful. Okay. Is there any other questions on the overview portion?
Related to the procedures?
Yes.
I do have,
Item
yeah.
number 3.
Okay, so I do
No.
have one question for you.
Yes.
Last meeting I had asked about OPEB and term benefits, and you indicated to me at that point there was no OPEB specific outline in the city. However, as I went through and looked at the labor contracts related to it, and you and I kind of had a brief discussion about it, in relation to termination benefits, my question revolved around the outline of the monthly expenditures, and you had it earmarked vacation or sick leave, et cetera. I guess my question is, has the city council set a corporate policy related to the funding of that specific item? And the reason I asked that is because as I looked at the MOUs, there were several, I don't want to call them generous, but they are capped sick leave, where the employee could, at the end of the 7-year term, and it's a prorated scale, have a significant exposure based on that. And my current understanding is we don't set aside. And that could be a very, I mean, I'm not exactly sure how many full-time employees the city has that we covered under those MOUs currently. But obviously, at 7-year mark, that's a significant dollar amount that should be evaluated. And to me, it's a corporate policy more at the city council level, but I think we would be remiss if we don't try and incorporate it into the actual procedural document and actually look at the monthly expenses and how it's funded.
Okay. Now, the sick and vacation, we do keep a running banks.
Okay.
What I do not have the ability to do is to see what the vesting percentage is person by person in the sick, because that is not vested 100%. It takes the 7 years.
Okay.
So at year end, we do a complete calculation, and then we record a liability in our debt fund, so we know how much that is. The city hasn't had the funds to set aside any reserves, but that is part of the whole. We need to have reserves in place to help take care of that, because the city is funding as you go, which we know can be a little bit scary.
Sure.
And I know that in 2015, 2016, we had a huge turnover. There were a lot of people who left. And there were people who were shifted around. And so a lot of that liability, I believe that's also when it got capped, that a lot of that liability went away, which is good because they hadn't really calculated it before that.
Right. I guess my concern, and I understand where you're going with it, I think that for me personally, I look at it from a standpoint, there should at least be a target
Yes.
Even if it's a moving target that we should be corporately trying to say, even if it's 1% funding a year, et cetera, whatever that is. I don't know what that target number is.
Right.
It's you know, it's gonna be based on a percentage of what your anticipated leftovers or residuals are gonna be. But the scary one for me, in all honesty, and I just got back from League of Cities 2 weeks ago, and the scary one was, everybody there talking about PERS.
PERS is a different issue. Yep.
Well,
Absolutely.
But the fact that they can calculate out that 7 years of sick leave into 6 months service credit is a significant exposure to the city, by far and above just the cash value.
Right.
So that's something that clearly needs to be identified, as a huge liability in outlining what our intention is long term.
So are you saying that you would like to see that policy within these documents
I
and
would.
how we're adjusting?
Correct.
Okay.
Not to belabor it, but I think
Right,
that
right.
it's a
Valid
huge
point.
exposure for the city that we need to be very concerned
Okay.
about.
Okay.
So,
What is the current policy?
You're calling it OPEB.
well, there's OPEB.
We do, right. It's not OPEB.
You can
We don't.
accrue as much, you've been here 20 years, you've never been sick, to have 2 years credit.
A maximum of, yes. There, it is a maximum. There's a cap on everyone based on, how long they've been here, gives them the vesting, and then there's a ceiling on how much they can hold in their bank.
And don't we also have different structures based on different
Contracts, yes.
contracts? I mean, we have multiples, correct?
Right,
Okay.
right. But there are caps. There are caps on all of those.
And that I do applaud you for. Good job on getting that in there.
Thank you. Fortunately, that was done before I got here. I was
Oh,
just
take credit
really
for it.
happy about the OPEB not being an issue for the city of Beaumont.
There is actually something you could smile about.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good point, though. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on the overview? Okay, if not, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the Finance Department Policies and Procedures, Capital Assets, Draft 1.
Yes. Because we're expecting anytime the report from the consultant that we hired for the fixed asset inventory and valuation process, this is what I thought would be the most important, so that it's something we've already discussed and we have a good idea of it before we start capturing that and rolling forward with new totals. Now, of course, the city has always had their assets recorded for the enterprise funds as they were supposed to, but not for the city. So when we get the final report and we have all of our softwares in place, because I'm also working with the fixed asset software management folks at this time too, making sure we capture it the way that we need to report it, making sure we have all the right categories, making sure that we have in place how it is we want to track costs. Public Works is now starting to build things, so making sure that our project accounting works, all of these different pieces, and there's a lot of moving pieces right now. I thought this would be the best thing to work out. I had a meeting with staff last week going over how to do project accounting, how to capture the project accounting, what we expect, how they need to code things that are coming through, that we want budgets on all projects before they ever start incurring dollars, that if it's more than any kind of dollar amount that someone would be concerned about, at the city of Beaumont, it is $10,000. City council knows, you've seen the budget, you know what it's going to be, and we know what the funding source is, so we don't just jump into fixed assets. I talked to them about things that seemed fairly normal and routine, which is the purchase of a car. And they said, does that need to be a project? And what I told them is that, yes, I want it as a project, because if you buy a police vehicle, you then have to get the radio equipment, you have to get the lights, you have to put in special, the dividery thingy, all the different pieces, and it doesn't just show up already ready to go. You're getting all these different things done. So let's set up as a project. Then not only do we have it all captured as the one asset, we know how long it will take to get it from the actual vehicle in order to place it in service. We have a pretty good idea. You ask, they'll say, it takes about 4 months or whatever. But if we do it through the project accounting, we'll know exactly how that works. And there's also the ability to make comments and notes on each project, where if there's a vendor that we've had some issues with, concerns with, the work had to be redone, anything, we can make notes in that system, and then we know when we go to RFP next time if there's something we need to consider. So there's a lot of different things that we can use this program for. So we talked about how to use it going forward. City Council did the 5-year CIP, and I'm trying to set up all of those projects that Amr has on his list, and there's a lot of them, but at least each one of them already has a preliminary budget. So the software, I can put in a preliminary budget. If there's a change through council, I have the ability to put in budget adjustments project by project. We can track vendor by vendor. We can do purchase orders. We can do a lot of things. So in putting that all together and letting it roll through my head, I thought, while it's still there, put it in this policy and give us something to look at and review together. And some of it might be kind of rambly because that's how my brain's working these days. So I didn't know if anyone's actually had the chance to read through it, see if it makes sense, if it flows, or if there's something I left out because I'm so deep in the weeds getting this set up. So that's where this came from.
I have one question about physical inventories. As written, makes a lot of sense. However, doesn't appear to be any process to ensure that the buildings, lands, other non-movable assets are still there and in good repair. Does it make sense to have this done on a less frequent basis, like every 5th year?
We could do that. That would make sense, especially when we're looking to see what kind of condition is it in. Is it something we're going to be able to utilize for some purpose, or is there a reason to then look for alternatives or tear it down or whatever the case may be? So I can add that as well.
That just seems to make sense so that something doesn't slide into the background and suddenly we have so much deferred maintenance it can't be.
Right. We have a building
Taken
half
care of.
sagging sideways.
Right.
Yeah.
I have one quick question for you regarding the project that you just talked about. So there are certain fixed assets or assets, if you're using the $5,000 threshold, and you use the police car as an example. God, I hate those examples because they're expensive. A radio, single radio in that could very easily run over $5,000.
Yes.
So how are you rolling that up into the overall project? Because you're going to have, because you theoretically could have fixed assets that are now rolled up into your overall project, and they're going to compound, and all of a sudden you're going to have $80,000 squad car.
Right, and that's really what we do have.
Okay.
So what would happen, though, is that when that squad car needs to be retired, what we determine, or what they've determined at this point, especially PD, they're really good at this, is saying, okay, the lights that are on this vehicle, can we salvage them and use them on the next one? And then in the next one, we'd only have the installation cost of it. We wouldn't have the entire lights again. Same with the radios. If the radio equipment doesn't have to be completely replaced, then it would just be a partial, and we could keep track of that, and we could go back to the project and see, oh, well, the lights cost us $5,000. We can allocate, if it seems worth it, to try and figure out what the book value would be the day to transfer to new asset.
We just did that on an animal control vehicle, we're correct? We just bought a new one, but they're moving the actual shell and all
Right.
that stuff onto that new vehicle.
Those KG door
Right,
things.
The little door thing, shove animal,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've got great technical terms tonight.
Me too.
I'm doing good.
So then it is possible that a project over a period of time, pieces of that project may be depreciated and other pieces won't. So the whole project won't be considered as a single item for depreciation unless it is all new, comes on board at the same time, but over a period of time can be pieced out.
Right, right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And as for assets that are below 5,000, and I think I added this in here, especially IT related, because computers are really cheap now. We're still tagging them. We're still going to track them. They just won't be recorded as a fixed asset, but they are going to be in our system. And we're going to have them, you know, if it's assigned, if somebody's got a tablet because they're doing work in the field that integrates, then we will have it tagged, not only that particular one, but we'll know who has it. And so we'll be able to get them back at the end or hold the person accountable for it if something happens. So we'll be tracking those. We just won't be recording them as assets.
Is the intent to roll up all licensing agreements or user fees into the project too?
For
Like
software,
Yeah, for
Right. That won't be in the capital cost. That'll be amortized over whatever that life is, if it's a year or less.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we're just building that first launch into that. Okay.
No. You're welcome.
So are we at item 5?
Awkward silence.
I figured it was just reading the ramblings of a lunatic finance
Going
person.
through here.
We're on to the,
Yeah. Because I was really worried
Item
about some of
5,
these condition indexes. We've gotten the report on the streets index, and wow, it's detailed.
unless there's more
Haven't
questions.
decided how I'm going to approach that part yet, but as far as regular assets, I can, once I have the report, I can work with that, so.
Okay, so I think that looks good.
Okay.
I don't really see anything that's staring at me.
Okay. Well, we have time. I mean, if
Yeah.
in the next meeting or 2 meetings up, if something I say triggers, we still have the ability to make edits. And even after we've got it published for council's approval, it's still something we can edit as we go forward.
It'll end up being a dynamic document. and
Right.
As we move forward, we'll see things that maybe want to switch or fix up.
Absolutely.
More.
Sure.
You're not going to put it in concrete, right?
Heavens, no.
Okay, is there any other questions on the capital assets? We good? Okay, let's move on to item number 5, July 2017 financial reports,
Version 2.
version 2.
Version 2. There will be a version 3 if that makes you feel good too. We just today were working on some of the year-end accruals and getting the reversals in. So I know, having posted those today, that of course numbers that I printed out on Friday are now different. But one of the questions that came up was, what exactly is it that council's getting? So I wanted you to see, they get 4 pages, and it's a real high level, but it's the budget to actual for the general fund and for the wastewater fund, and then this year versus last year, general fund and wastewater fund.
Is that item number 5?
That is item number 5, sub-piece number 1, if that's a thing. Yes, yes. They're these ones.
Okay.
There's 4 pages right in a row, and these are the ones that council will get.
Okay, so it's
So-
5A, city council reports?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's the one, so that you know what kind of format it's in. So it's rolled up. It's at a more summarized level than what this committee will be looking at. So behind that then are the same reports you saw before, but updated for the changes that have been made through last Friday. Same things where you've got the line items, each account number where you can see budget versus actual and what we've got remaining on the exact same funds, the exact same format, just more detail. Then what I have, and I don't think I printed it for myself. Huh. Then, oh, I did. I added 2 things because I found them interesting, but this committee might not. But I have gone through and done year-to-date, which is, of course, just July, all the payments to vendors. So this is checks that were written by the city. So I took it, I summarized by vendor, and I did anybody that got $10,000 or more. The first one is alphabetic by vendor. The second page is by dollar amount, the highest dollar amount down to the lowest. And when I did that, it's anything over 10,000 ends up being 95% of all of our vendor payments. So you have a really good idea of where the money, actual checks written, are going from the city for at least the month of July. If it was 2 months, it would be for the 2 months. But I tried to put in a type so you could see some of them they're easy. I didn't actually have to put something in because I think we all know Edison is a utility. But I just put some in there to see if this would be useful for the committee to know where it is that the money is actually going, not from an accounting, like account number, how are we categorizing it, but who's actually getting the money. Just something else to look at, to consider.
So this report could just be run on a monthly basis?
I can do it monthly, I can do it as a year-to-date, in whatever manner makes the most sense. If the committee would like to keep tabs on it on a year-to-date, we can do that too.
Can
And-
you give us more detail? A lot of them are missing.
Oh yeah, I just kind of did the ones that were obvious because I knew them right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But some of them I do know what they are, I just didn't put them in.
I can't remember, what was the straddling yucca?
They're legal.
Was that regarding the SEC?
Some.
I think this has a lot of value
Okay.
just because of some of the historical things that have happened. We could see huge amounts going to some particular vendor and would have an opportunity to say, is there some reason why that vendor is getting such a big chunk?
Right.
I just think it has a lot of value from that standpoint of nothing else.
Right. And that also then tells you if we should have a standing purchase order for some of these. And for most of them, we do. We have a purchase order. It's already been approved by council. We have that whole process we go through. We don't get purchase orders on utilities because those are what they are. So we pay them as they come in. But I believe besides utilities and the personnel, that they do go through a purchase order process.
I disagree a little bit I like the idea of possibly seeing who may be getting most of the cake, but I don't think I would like to see it on a monthly basis.
Okay.
I think you can capture that over a period of time, semi-annual kind of like a thing.
Okay. Just something to review.
The city government, you hire people to run city government. Council sets the policy, hires the professionals. At some point, you do the budget, which is a big thing that puts everything in motion. These people are responsible to do the job, and you're setting up nice criteria now for them to follow to make sure that there's no shenanigans that go on. I don't know if I want to get down the weeds about looking at a lot of that stuff. Vendors, 1995 for whatever. Maybe on a semi-annual basis or something, to see if there's any kind of something that might pop up in terms of some favoritism or something.
Sharon, how do you feel about this? Is this something that would be valuable for you to look at?
It's interesting to look at it on a monthly basis. I see the checks every week.
Right. And that's what I was thinking too. What I actually did this for was to make sure that we had the purchase orders in the system. So if I saw that's why I chose 10,000. Anybody who's gotten $10,000 already, will either it better be part of the exempt group that doesn't have a purchase order ever, or we better have a purchase order for them. So that's what I was really using it for. And it's amazing how quickly those checks add up.
Yeah.
And until you see them this way, it just,
It's interesting to
Yep.
see it this way.
so, but like I said, I ran it for myself and thought maybe the committee would want to see it just because it's just one of those things you don't normally think about, and you wouldn't see it this way from the normal accounting records. It wouldn't come up like this.
But these are all accounted for from both a budget standpoint.
Yes.
Yeah, it's money that a department has to run their department.
Mhm.
To do the business of the city. So, if somebody's starting to exceed their budget by, more than their budget, or they're coming back to council all the time asking for more money, I think that would be a red flag. Hello, can't you manage your department? Can't you manage your budget?
Right.
Us here looking at the thing and saying, oh, that's interesting that John Doe is buying 4 donuts. I don't, it's just up to you guys. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
It's a simple report, but, it's easy to look at.
Right. Until it becomes more than 1 month, becomes 4 months, and then it's 4 pages.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it,
Yeah, and the more
just over
detail-
time, this is just for 1 month's activity, so it could build.
Yeah, you're talking about purchase orders.
Right, right. And like I said, I do it to keep tabs on where things are, but,
What would be the pleasure of this group? I mean, I'm just one person here, so
That's when I'm kind of just getting some input. I mean, Sharon is the one that I want to make sure that we're satisfying her needs along with what we're doing, you know, from a committee standpoint. So
I can
if,
actually go in and run reports too, which I do usually every week.
does anybody else see value in getting this?
yeah. And you
run?
can run this so that you get the total, but it breaks down every check somebody gets, so you get to go through and go, wait a minute, I don't remember that one.
Yeah, I can,
Right,
That's why I think that we should see it in perhaps maybe even a dollar amount on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
Yes, there's a budget, and the budget shouldn't be exceeded, but there's been some history, and we want to say that, to be able to say that there's not some insider dealing happening, and we can say, okay, look, the business is spread out. Or if we see something shows up, I don't know, I'll just pick one of these that I don't even know who they are. Okay, utility partners, and we start saying, wow, they're the only person that's doing this type of work. Why? And I think at that point in time, it would behoove us to just say, do we have some exclusive contract with them? And just, but I think quarterly would be,
I agree. Quarterly.
and just an aggregate total.
right.
Don't see
Right,
any
just like
sense in
this
seeing.
one line item, and do you want to
Yeah.
look at any particular threshold, or is 10,000 okay, or do you want to up,
Well,
down?
10,000's at the level that it has to get council approval. right?
Absolutely.
well, I think if on a quarterly basis, it might be interesting to see what is the purchase order amount, and then what's been paid to date,
Right, to get some of the,
you know?
I haven't, well, I have run some of those purchase order status reports. Some of them are a little
So I don't know.
tough.
Yeah,
but-
because there's more than one purchase order.
Right, one vendor may have 3 or 4, depending on who's using them for what. Right,
So
but we can play with those too. I have lots to choose
we
from.
don't want to
so-
create any more work for you. But, well, I'm just, hopefully we're not creating a lot more work for Milana, but yeah, if everyone wants to see it, then.
Yeah, I think that would be valuable to know what the PO is and then what's been paid year to date or whatever. I think that would be,
And it's a push-a-button report, correct?
With the purchase order in it, I will check. I think so, though. I think
Should-
I would just be able to do a sort and subtotal out of it when I put it in Excel, and then I'd be able to do the one lines. So that should work.
Could you flag also, either in red or however you want to do that, those that are maybe exceeding their quarterly amount for the year end?
Well, we're going to be doing the budget to actual with council when we're going to evaluate at 9:30 to make sure that everybody, because now the department heads have had 2 years now where they're actually putting their own budgets together. We're going to do a much better analysis of where they actually are to budget. We'll bring that to council. We'll talk about it, and if we need to make budget adjustments, shifting between or whatever else may be coming up, especially with our fee study being issued here in the next month, then we'll make those requests at that time. So we're going to start looking at that quarterly with council as well.
That's good. That answered that. I mean, I don't know if I will be telling you to have more work on the, like the account analysis or something, because they're talking about PO.
Right.
And if there's any threshold in there, 5,000, 10,000, there should be a project, related to those
Right.
big PO and everything. So the council could see that, we could see it too, that, there will be an account analysis on that particular dollar amount. I don't know, I mean, if
Right.
you have those.
And nothing actually, because we have the purchase order system set up in such a way that if a purchase order is for greater than 5,000, we can enter it, but we can't pay anything until it has the click box for city council, and there's only one person who has the authority to click the box on behalf of city council. That's our deputy city clerk. And so she's really good about, and she wants a copy of the minutes, so she goes back and finds where it came through, makes sure that it was voted on, and we can actually scan and attach that to the purchase order in the system. So she's been really good about that. So, yeah, we've got the checks and balances internally for that.
Very good. Hey, do we need a motion? Or do we need a motion? Receive quarterly?
No, just, I'll make a note. Once we finally get settled on what and when, then we'll put together a better template so we know exactly what you'll get consistent. Because I find a report and go, ooh, this is neat. So I'm trying to control myself a little bit, but.
I would like to see this group get to the point where we receive these reports, once everything is codified, and then we review them, we ask the questions, we get answers, blah, blah, and then at the end of the day, we receive and file that report as a committee.
Right, and then it will support the summary report that council will get after that, and it'll always flow that way. It's just getting us jump-started. Got to get there. The other report that I handed out, because I could not get it to run on Friday, so each of you has it, is a preliminary. This is the treasurer's report. The treasurer's report. What I discovered is in using the software, when you push the button, the formulas in the background aren't right. So this is like a cash flow, but it doesn't come out right. So I took that idea and then I fixed it so that it would flow. So when you start at the beginning and add and subtract across, you actually get the right ending balance. The punch the button report does not work well at all. But if this works so that you can see the cash position of each fund, it's not hard to get this information plugged in so that we can generate it each month. So I didn't know, we talked about it and I thought it was something that would be helpful to see fund by fund where we're sitting for each fund cash balance wise, but that's what this actually is.
I like it.
Okay.
I like it. In fact, it raises questions right away.
Just a few?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious. Emergency preparedness development.
Yes.
Negative,
Mm-hmm.
3 million.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what that is.
Well,
We don't have any money to be in case of an emergency. I mean,
no, that's not what that is. The Emergency Preparedness Fund, numbers 550 through 570. Those are developer impact fees. So before a developer can construct anything on the land, they have to pay the fees that have been set by the city. So we have all of these different impact fees. We have the basic service impact, general plan impact, traffic, railroad, fire station, road and bridge, recycled water, emergency preparedness, and the park. MSHCP is a pass-through, but it has to be set up separate. So the emergency preparedness impact fee, the idea was that impact fees would be collected and then they would be able to repay the city for things that they had already done. So they spent the money in advance. So we continue to get the impact fee to pay it back. And that's what that is. And that's something we discovered when we did the reconciliation. Because it was done by ordinance. That's what they called it. I know. Right. But it actually, in a way, is oddly, is where we did prepare. The city prepared because they spent funds that they hadn't even gotten yet. And part of that is my understanding. I'm not 100% on everything, but part of it is the community center, where if there's an emergency, they're able to have people there overnight or overtime, and all of the supplies that go with that. Then something at, and I'm so bad, I'm sorry, something at the sports park, they had to move the lighting so that they could use that as a, like a command center, or where they could bring in equipment and different things. So it's stuff they did in advance.
I get it.
Yeah.
So the negative is that the city has put out the money.
Right,
And it will eventually be reimbursed
yes,
by developer fees
right.
over a period of time.
And then when it's paid off, then that will be settled and it'll go away.
I would think these will make sense to us and the city council as we start seeing them more, and questions will come up like this. John Q. Citizen may have questions that may burden back on you,
Maybe.
but I think this is fantastic.
Good deal. Yeah, there's a few that that I put in bold where I went, really? Why? And some of them I've already identified why, so I will fix those. So in some ways, it really pointed out some of the, like the fund transfers that I didn't make it the right way. So it made the cash look negative, but that particular fund, like the wastewater capital projects, doesn't have cash. So I just put some entries through the wrong way. I just need to fix them so that it balances out right. And in total, the cash balance is right. So it's just a matter of, okay, so what did I got to put things in the right buckets when I do the journal entries to make it balance out right. But the total should be exactly the same. It should not change.
So the wastewater capital project fund has no money.
It only has money if we are building something and we are giving, it's got a funding source and the money's being transferred in. So the money has to be there first, so it can't be negative.
I thought we were looking at building, or building, or are we
Expanding.
expanding?
Expanding. And that will happen but the,
And that funding is coming from where? Increased fees?
well, some of it, but we're working on that now. That's a whole project that takes up much of my time. So, yeah,
You hit it.
yes, but that is something. So what the number is there is we've incurred the design costs because we had to, but I forgot to put the rest of the entry through to cover it. So it comes out of the cash that's in Fund 700. I have to do a transfer between them. So I just hadn't done it yet.
So this report we could run monthly,
Yes.
okay? And our meetings being at the very beginning of the month, is the time cutoff, I guess is what I'm asking, the end of the month cutoff, would we be seeing a month prior, or would we see the immediate previous month? So like, let's say we've got the end of September, right, so our meeting's the
Right.
3rd of October, are we gonna be, we would be seeing June number, or August numbers?
Probably August, only because we haven't finished getting all the postings of cash receipts in for September yet, so I wouldn't want to short it.
Okay, I like this report.
It's very good. I mean, no, sorry. It's very good. I mean, on my side, on controlling all the cash and everything, at a glance right away, I could see it. There's a change in there. There's a variance of about 12 million in there. And I could identify right away that where's that 10 million or 12 million that we're short. I mean, if I could see this, analyze it, I could see it that the CFD is moving along on this cash thing in there.
Right.
The way it works, I mean, it's short in here, you gain in here because it plays around and moving around. Very, very good. I
Good.
really, really appreciate that. I mean,
Sure.
looking at this
Right.
report. Now I could identify the 12 million, okay, it's coming from the CFD, that, if I need more information on that, I could come to you and say, hey, why
Why'd that
we're
change?
moving this money of 12 million on this side, or 10 million on the CFD alone.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So,
Right. When you see September, there's going to be a lot in the fund transfer column, and that's because in September is when we approve the CIP budget. And so some of those projects are beginning. So where we have internal funds, like from the Road and Bridge Development DIF fund, you're going to see transfers out of that and into the funds where we're starting to do like the street improvements and that kind of thing. So we'll be able to see how we're funding some of these projects because they're going to be in that transfer column.
yeah, but the thing is, it's within the fund.
Right.
Very good.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm always reluctant to ask you questions that may generate more work. There's like 35 line items here. It would be possible over the next couple of months to get a little detail of what they are. General fund kind of makes obvious sense, but some of them, maybe just a 1 or 2 line
Oh, the explanation.
explanation.
Oh, sure.
And if it's something that might be a little bit different, how it comes in and comes out, just a simple explanation.
Sure.
And, okay,
Do
do
we
that.
not see that on any of the other reports we're running? The more detail of these
As far as,
accounts?
but you wouldn't tell you that this fund is actually being, it's collecting funds from the state of California, from the gasoline tax that people pay, we get monthly, can only be spent on transfers to do X, Y, or Z. That's the kind of thing you're looking for, right?
yeah, and I think it'd be a
That doesn't
one-time
come in.
ever thing, but,
No, I know that it may be, because, out of sight, out of mind, but it might be in the annual budget document. I want to say we tried to put in a little spattering of what each one was, but we also were still working on pulling it all apart. So it's easy enough to do. It won't be a burden or anything, so I can have that done.
Anything else? Okay, I like this report.
Got a lot of thumbs up on this report.
Deal. But the reports that I'm giving to city council, the 4 pages, and then the more detailed of the same 4 for this committee, is that something that we want to continue to do? And so next month, I want to be done with July. I'm really tired of looking at it. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it would be nice to get that one done so we can start jumping and going current, so.
Yes.
Okay, then we'll just kind of run with this format.
Okay, is there any other questions on the financial reports? And then we can always go through these 2 and then bring up anything in our next meeting on any
Yeah.
other questions everybody has, so,
Absolutely.
okay. All right, if there's no other questions on item number 5, we'll move on to number 6, which is our future agenda items.
I would like to, if you're gonna, on the department policies and procedures overview, that draft 2, is that on the city's website?
Only as an attachment to the agenda. I don't think it's anywhere else yet, because we haven't published it as a final.
I'd like to see that back. I would like to look at it in more detail.
Okay,
Oh, it's on the website as far as the agenda item. When you go on, you just click on it and that document comes up.
Okay.
I'm looking at them
They
here.
they continue those from month to month, don't they? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
they're still in there. Yeah,
You
they
can go
keep
back
the
and-
history.
Any month and click on that agenda item and it'll come up. Yeah.
I'll pick it up there.
So it looks like we'll be reviewing a second draft on, well, actually, we had no changes, did we, on the capital assets? We were good with that?
No, only if someone has suggestions, maybe at the
Coming
next
in the
meeting.
future?
Mhm.
Okay.
But I am going to add about doing a less frequent inventory of the larger assets.
the non-movable assets.
Right. So I will have that, but.
Okay.
And then you're going to do an update on the suggestion for how you're accruing for the payment based on the memorandum of understanding, correct? For the PERS. Isn't that what we, you want to see?
Right.
You want to see some definition to the wording, right?
Right, okay.
Is
I'm
that
I'm
possible?
wondering if that's something that we would want to get to in a little bit more detail through maybe a payroll or a personnel-related policy that would fall underneath the general. What do you think?
Versus it being in,
Just in the overview?
Well, what I was thinking was, to be honest with you, I was leaning more towards the corporate policy, more driven by what the city council was comfortable with. To be honest with you, I mean, we could make a recommendation. but
Oh, I
it's really
see. With the city's financial policies, which is a different document
Okay.
But then we
entirely.
roll that
Yeah,
back
that's a
into
different one.
this to
Okay.
clean that up.
All right,
Does that make sense?
okay.
I mean, ultimately, it's your.
Yeah.
We're a recommending body in this aspect. You know, it's, I mean, we can recommend all the way. But
Okay, no, that's
And
good.
we are working with one of our consultants, working on a document that allows us to do future planning where we can plug in and see what's going to happen. And it is a 5-year document too. So I'm sure we're taking that to council. I'm just not sure when. Met with him last week to kind of tweak some of the things he had in there. Some of the base points needed to be changed because circumstances keep changing, so,
Yeah, that 7-year timeline is a very quick escalating.
yes,
It doesn't take very long for that to be a fully vested 100%.
right,
So,
absolutely.
Okay, so I think we're basically looking at whatever you've got in your policy and procedures for next month. Moving along on that process, and then our financial reports. Okay.
We'll try and get July nailed down at the next report so we can start jumping forward. What I'm hoping to have for this committee at the next meeting is the fiscal 16 audit draft.
Really? Okay.
That's my plan.
Is there any way to get some of this, we're getting a lot of stuff, but is there any way to get this like maybe a week before, instead of Friday before? I don't know what your timeline or deadline.
It kind of depends on when I finish typing them. Friday, I thought I only had 1 or 2 things to do, and then as I started into it, I realized I had a lot more than 1 or 2 things to do. So a lot of it wasn't ready prior to, but I can make that a target where I try and get it so that we can post it earlier.
I think Nicole tries to get it done on Thursdays, but
It totally depends on me. I will tell you that for sure. I was the holdup this week and the last month. I was the holdup as well. So I try.
It's so much stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to look at it all.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff.
Well, so along those lines, do we need to maybe look at reducing the number of reports so that we can get them sooner and maybe vet them more thoroughly to kind of make your life a little easier, or?
that might be what we need to do, because I think I think it's looking at these reports as you get them finalized, and then going through those and saying, okay, these are the ones we absolutely need to take a look at. And this is how often we want to take a look at them. Because I think some of them, we kind of looked at those before and said, quarterly would be sufficient.
Right.
Instead of it being on an every monthly basis. And then last week's meeting, we definitely decided we wanted to see what was going to council, so that we could
Right.
make our recommendation for approval on that. So we know those we want every month, but the other ones, we might not want to look at those except for every quarter. And then I think that'll reduce the work on you too.
We could do that. Like I said, as we get things settled too, it'll become more routine. It'll be a little easier too. So
Right.
it's just every time I run a report, I go, ooh, that one's neat. Trying.
As I recall, last meeting, you handed out a stack of these reports that you printed out.
Oh, I had a whole slew of
Yes,
things. Yes.
and I thought we had discussed looking at those, taking some time, and then discussing which ones we wanted to see. And
And we were kind of waiting for this treasurer's
Right.
report
Right.
to come about. So it looks like you're getting the treasurer's report pretty much there. I mean, we
Right,
can
I
expand on some
I
of the
just have to do
categories.
it myself in some ways. It'll just be partially out of the system, and then I fix it after that. So.
Right, okay. And I think we can take the reports that we've already been given, and then by next meeting, we'll kind of be more familiar, and then pick out
Right.
those that we feel
Oh,
is
sure.
good going forward.
So put that
so we have
on the
that as an agenda
to
item
discuss
to
for the next
discuss
one.
which ones
Yep.
we'd like to see.
Right. So that would be last meeting and the meeting prior was the last 2 meetings we had different various reports coming in.
Right,
So,
because there are a ton. There
Yeah.
are a ton to choose from. So
okay, so bring those back with us for next month's meeting.
okay,
And then drill down on the treasurer's report, correct?
right, with the explanations, the
Right.
detail of
A
what
little
each
bit more
one's for.
detail. Okay. And then I think we can, between all those reports, I think we can make up our mind.
Okay.
Can we get an update on on Wilmington and the reporting from Wilmington? Next one?
Sure.
Sorry, Milana.
Sure.
Don't hold it against me.
Right now, we have our activities. We're doing pretty good.
You don't
keeping
have to do it
current.
today. I meant the next
No,
meeting.
but we've got everything entered. Trustee activity July and August are in. September just ended, so then we'll do September. The journal entries that still aren't in, because we're trying to figure how it went from here to who to what, is those bond refundings. Make sure we trace the activity and get them recorded in the right ones that they went through. It's a little bit difficult to track some of it because it works through an escrow account, which we don't have access to, which is fine. We're not supposed to. So we're just trying to see if we put it all in, if it then comes all out the way we want. And so we've been fiddling, but we did 10 refundings all at once. So it's hard to say, well, let's.
So is
make these
December a
work.
better month to get an update on Wilmington than November?
No, I would hope that we can get that settled here
Okay.
pretty soon,
All right.
and that way we can provide some good reporting on Wilmington. But it is, the Wilmington trustee accounts are included in the accounting records. They're just not in the treasurer's report because I don't consider them city cash. Those are held on behalf of others.
Right.
So, but I have them, so we can always pull that up and do a report on that as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? Good?
Hey, one more thing. It came up because of the question about whether we would, what the end of the year meant. January, our first meeting, is a holiday. Do we want to address that now, or do we have a standing?
We'll do it next, yeah, that was January 1st, which was New
Right.
Year's Day, so it
What's the
Okay,
next?
so is that an automatic?
pretty much.
Okay.
Okay. If that's it on, I think that's good for next month's agenda. And then, meeting review.
I was going to report that Mr. Halliwell resigned and that Steve Martino will be taking over the position on the committee. That we talked about the SCO. Oh, can you hear me?
No. Can you hear her on the video? Okay, move it closer, Sharon.
That these, and that the state controller's office report, there really was no change from what needed to be accomplished in satisfying those couple of issues. I don't know how much detail I should go
I
into.
don't think it needs to be too, I think an important part of that would be that the goal is to have it completed by the end of December
Policies
and available in January's meeting, yeah.
And, procedures. Well, and then on the policies and procedures, Milana was explaining that for now they're covering the basic categories, and when the, later on when it's kind of finalized, it'll be reviewed by the Finance and Audit, and it will be decided at that time what other functions might need detailed procedures. Does that?
Yeah, I think that's good.
I don't know how to word this on this corporate policy for the PERS and sick leave and vacation leave.
I think
Corporate policies for the what? I can't hear.
the policy and presenting it to the board to add in the
Just taking care of the.
retirement.
Oh,
Taking
PERS.
care of the, yeah, the PERS and the term benefits.
I think we should leave that for
Yeah.
future.
I think so. I think it's good to raise the issue, and you're correct. It's really something that generally should just go back to council. So we can probably just address it as it fits the agenda coming forward. What do you think, Mike? Or do you, I mean, I don't want to push it before it's due, but we do, it's a good point to bring up to council. So what are your thoughts?
Do you think maybe it would come about on the 216 audit that we would see come through?
That might be a good time for it to come
That might be a
through.
good time, huh?
Well, the talking about taking it from a council perspective on how we want to write up how we're treating the reserves that we're keeping for the liability based on the memorandum of understanding. So that might come up as part of the general audit discussion when the audit's presented. And so that might be an opportune time to just talk about it with council. Because we don't really want to make, it's up to council to discuss it.
Right, no, that would be a good idea to bring it up, because it did pose a problem 2 years ago. When we were looking for money to pay out, so definitely something to discuss and, yeah.
It might be a good time, sure.
I
And it
think
might,
there's value just rolling it back into those documents here. That was my point.
right.
Yeah,
Whatever that corporate policy is, let's
Because it's part of the policy.
right, let's historically recognize it into their
Right. Well, and we can have for council, council can always give direction too, is that we take the financial policies that were accepted citywide previously and make sure that it has language in there about it, or that we develop something for council to review in order to update that particular document for that specific issue. We can do that too, because we established in that we were going to have the goal of establishing reserves in order to reserve 3 months of operational costs, I believe was the case, so that we start having reserves. So we can always say, and put that in there, that we also have a goal of at some point having some percentage of what the annual liability towards benefit costs, something like that. So council could direct us to add something like that, and we could bring that back.
That's a good idea.
So, should I talk about that in this report? Or is that gonna be?
I think I would hold it
Yeah,
till
my
next.
feeling is that,
It's,
because it wasn't really
Yeah.
a strong recommendation. What it was bringing it up so that it gets discussed among council. So I think that, that's appropriate, how we're going to
You wanna
handle
go
it.
ahead and put it in for the meeting?
Because
Or
they
do you wanna
can,
hold it till we
council
review the
can
260?
also, not only that, but council can also then direct not only staff to look into it, but then to discuss it with the committee and then bring
Sure.
it forward for recommended, editing to the city document or something like that.
And that's a good point. What I think we do is direct Alana to maybe bring that up to council as a recommendation from finance committee when you present the audit.
Okay, can do that,
That way all the dots are connected.
right?
So do we want it in this,
No.
this report? No.
Milana's going to bring it up when the audit's discussed. And
Yeah.
when she brings it up when the audit's discussed, it will be from finance to the whole council.
Right.
They'll take it where they want to guide it because we didn't craft it. It was just brought up to make sure that awareness gets put into.
Right, because that that
consideration.
financial overview document already now exists and is published that council approved, which doesn't mean that that's set in stone either, but we can bring that up as a specific item to consider.
So I think that, I think that addresses everybody's
Yeah.
concerns
Sure.
if we do it that way.
I got it. I think so.
okay, and then, I was gonna talk a little bit about the capital asset policy, that Milana said she's using or going to be using the project costing software to account for the capital assets. And that it was suggested that the city might want to do a land and buildings physical inventory every 5 years. And that all equipment such as computers will be tracked, and I'll expand on that a little, but basically that's my note. And then that we, again, looked at the financial reports and what, looked at what city council's getting, and we're still deciding which reports we would like to see on a monthly basis and a quarterly basis.
And that'll be decided at the next meeting.
And that we looked at the treasurer's report and We really like that report. And in the future, again, I just hesitate to go into too much detail.
Yeah, I think just an overview.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we'd like to add to the treasurer's monthly? Good? Okay. Okay. I think we're ready to adjourn. It is 7:17. Thank you, everybody.